She noticed you before you opened your mouth, and she already decided. Not based on what you said, not based on your job or your car or your clever opening line. She decided based on something you cannot fake, something you cannot hide, and something most men never learn to control. The ancient philosophers understood this. Robert Greene wrote that the eyes reveal what the mouth conceals. Machiavelli warned that men judge by appearance first and by actions second. Schopenhauer believed that presence alone could dominate a room without a single word being spoken. These men understood something that modern society has buried under layers of noise and distraction. Words are the weakest form of power. And today, I am going to show you exactly why. There is a reason some men walk into a room and every head turns. There is a reason some men hold attention without trying. There is a reason certain men are remembered long after they leave, while others are forgotten before they finish speaking. This is not confidence. Confidence can be performed. This is not attractiveness. Attractive men fail with women constantly. This is something deeper, something older, something programmed into the human brain thousands of years before language existed. Schopenhauer called it the will, the force beneath conscious thought that drives all human behavior. He believed this force expressed itself through the body before the mind could interfere. Before you think, you project. Before you speak, you signal. And women evolved to read those signals the way predators read the movement of prey. This is not a metaphor. This is biology filtered through 500,000 years of survival pressure. Let me show you what I mean. Picture two men at a social gathering. The first man enters with his phone already in his hand. His shoulders curve slightly inward. His eyes scan the room quickly, checking to see who noticed him arrive. He finds a spot along the wall and waits for something to happen. The second man enters with nothing in his hands. His shoulders sit back naturally. His eyes move slowly across the room, resting on whatever interests him without urgency. He does not find a spot. He claims one. No words have been spoken. No introduction has been made. But every woman in that room has already sorted these two men into categories. One is prey. One is predator. And here is the disturbing truth that Machiavelli understood 5 centuries ago. The first man might be smarter. He might be richer. He might be more successful in every measurable way, but none of that matters, because judgment was passed in silence, and the verdict cannot be appealed. Robert Greene wrote extensively about what he called the law of presence. He observed that powerful figures throughout history shared one common trait. They commanded attention without demanding it. Think about what that means. Most men demand attention. They speak louder. They gesture bigger. They interrupt and insert and push their way into conversations. They work harder and harder to be noticed. And the harder they work, the less they receive. Because attention that is demanded is attention that is borrowed. It must be constantly maintained. The moment you stop performing, it disappears. But attention that is commanded operates by different rules entirely. It flows toward you without effort. It remains even when you are silent. It creates its own gravity. Greene studied this pattern across hundreds of historical figures: kings, generals, seducers, con artists, religious leaders. They all understood the same principle. The most powerful force in human interaction is the force you do not use. Now, I need you to understand something uncomfortable. Everything I just described is happening to you right now. Every time you enter a room, every time you stand in line, every time you exist in the presence of other humans, you are being read, evaluated, sorted. And most men have no idea this process is even occurring. Schopenhauer wrote that the majority of men live their entire lives as sleepwalkers. They move through the world reacting to what happens around them. They never realize that what happens around them is being shaped by the signals they project. This is the trap. You cannot escape being judged. You can only escape being judged poorly. And here is where dark psychology becomes useful. Because the philosophers who studied human nature most deeply also studied how to manipulate it, Machiavelli wrote in The Prince that a leader must understand how to use what he called the qualities of the lion and the fox, strength and cunning, force and deception. But there was a third quality he valued above both, the ability to project power without displaying it. He observed that the princes who made the greatest shows of force were usually the weakest. They needed the display because they lacked the reality. But the princes who sat quietly while others performed were the ones who actually held power. This applies directly to attraction. The man who tries to impress reveals that he needs to impress. The man who tries to dominate reveals that he fears being dominated. Every performance betrays an insecurity beneath it. But the man who does nothing, who simply exists with complete internal sufficiency, he reveals nothing, and what cannot be read cannot be dismissed. In the next segment, I am going to break down the specific signals that women read before you speak. The micro-movements, the stillness patterns, the eye behaviors that trigger attraction at a level beneath conscious thought. But first, you need to understand the foundation. You need to understand that everything you have been taught about talking to women is a distraction, a misdirection, a lie that keeps you focused on the wrong battlefield entirely. The war is won or lost before you open your mouth. And right now, you are losing. Freud believed that the unconscious mind speaks through the body. Every suppressed thought, every hidden fear, every secret desire finds expression through movement, through posture, through the 1,000 tiny adjustments we make without knowing we make them. He called these signals leakage, the unconscious leaking through the cracks of conscious control. And women are experts at reading leakage, not because they studied it, not because they chose to develop this skill, but because evolution demanded it. For thousands of generations, a woman's survival depended on her ability to judge a man's true nature before he revealed it through action. A wrong judgment meant death, or worse. So the women who could read beneath the surface survived. They passed on their genes, and their daughters inherited an ability that most men will never understand and can never escape. You are being decoded every moment you exist in her presence. Robert Greene identified what he called the shadow self, the version of you that operates beneath your conscious awareness. This shadow expresses itself constantly through nonverbal signals, the speed of your movements, the rhythm of your breathing, the tension in your jaw, the direction of your gaze, the position of your hands. You control none of these consciously, and yet they communicate more than every word you will ever speak. Greene studied seducers throughout history and found a pattern. The most successful ones moved differently than ordinary men. Not better. Differently. Their movements carried a quality he described as weighted stillness. They did not fidget. They did not rush. They did not fill silence with nervous motion. They existed in space as though they had absolute right to occupy it. And this stillness triggered something primal in the women who witnessed it. Schopenhauer wrote about what he called the will made visible. He believed that a person's fundamental character expressed itself through their physical presence before any conscious communication occurred. A weak will produces weak movements, hesitation, retraction, the constant small adjustments of someone unsure whether they belong. A strong will produces economy, precision, the absence of unnecessary motion. Watch any man you consider powerful, a CEO, a general, a master in any domain. You will notice immediately that he moves less than the men around him. He speaks less. He reacts less. This is not a trick. This is the external expression of internal certainty. And this is exactly what women are reading when they assess you in silence. Now I will show you something that will change how you move forever. Machiavelli observed that new princes always make the same mistake. They arrive in their kingdom and immediately begin making changes, issuing orders, demonstrating their authority. And in doing so, they reveal their insecurity. The established prince does the opposite. He changes nothing. He orders nothing. He simply occupies the throne as though he has always occupied it. His authority needs no demonstration because it needs no proof. This is the principle of assumed dominance. You do not prove your status, you assume it. When you enter a room, you are either asking permission or granting it. There is no third option, and your body reveals which one you are doing before your conscious mind even engages. The man who looks around to see who noticed him is asking permission. The man who looks around to see what interests him is granting it. The man who adjusts his position when someone approaches is asking permission. The man who remains exactly where he is forces others to adjust to him. The man who speaks quickly to fill silence is asking permission. The man who lets silence exist is granting others the privilege of filling it. Carl Jung wrote about archetypes, universal patterns that exist in the collective unconscious of all humans. He believed we recognize these patterns instinctively, without learning, without thought. One of the most powerful archetypes is what Jung called the king, the figure of calm authority, the unmoved center around which everything else revolves. Women are drawn to this archetype at a level deeper than preference. It triggers an evolutionary recognition response. Safety, resources, protection, genetic value. And here is what most men miss completely. You do not become the king archetype by achieving things. You do not earn it through success or money or status symbols. You embody it through stillness. The king does not chase. The king does not fidget. The king does not perform for approval. The king exists at rest while the world moves around him. This is not arrogance. Arrogance is a performance of superiority that reveals the need to be seen as superior. This is sovereignty, complete ownership of your own space, your own attention, your own nervous system. I want you to try something right now. Wherever you are sitting, stop moving completely. Let your hands rest. Let your face relax. Let your breath slow. And hold this stillness for 30 seconds. Notice how difficult this is. Your body will want to adjust, to scratch, to shift, to check your phone, to do something. This impulse to move is the leakage Freud described. It is your unconscious revealing its discomfort with simply existing. Every time you obey this impulse in public, women see it. They register it beneath conscious awareness, and they sort you into the category of men who cannot control themselves. The man who can hold stillness projects something rare, something most men cannot project, the signal that he is already complete. In the next segment, I will show you how the eyes operate as weapons of silent attraction, how to use gaze as the philosophers understood it, how to create tension, curiosity, and desire without speaking a single word. What I am about to reveal has been hidden in plain sight for centuries. The eyes are the only part of the brain visible from outside the body. Think about that. When you look into someone's eyes, you are looking directly at their nervous system, their fear, their desire, their weakness, their strength, all of it exposed through two small windows that cannot be closed. The ancient philosophers understood this. Plato wrote that the eyes were the gateway to the soul, but the dark psychologists understood something more useful. The eyes are also a weapon. Robert Greene studied the great seducers of history and found that every single one had mastered the art of the gaze. Cleopatra, Casanova, Rasputin, they understood that the eyes could create feelings in others that words never could. Desire, intimidation, fascination, submission, all without speaking. Schopenhauer wrote that most men cannot hold eye contact for more than 3 seconds. He observed this pattern repeatedly. When two strangers' eyes meet, one will always look away first, and the one who looks away has lost something. He called this the submission reflex, an ancient response programmed into the human brain from our time as animals. In the animal kingdom, direct eye contact is a challenge, a claim of dominance, and breaking eye contact is surrender. This reflex still operates in humans. We feel it as discomfort, as pressure, as the need to look somewhere else. Most men obey this reflex automatically. They look away from women. They look away from powerful men. They look away from anyone who holds their gaze too long. And every time they do, they signal submission. Nietzsche wrote about what he called the predator gaze. He observed that certain men looked at the world the way a hawk looks at the ground below. Not searching, not desperate, simply surveying what already belongs to them. This is the gaze that triggers attraction, not the hungry stare of a man who wants something. That gaze repels women. It signals need, desperation, the absence of options. The predator gaze signals the opposite. It says, I am assessing whether you are worth my attention. It reverses the frame completely. Most men look at beautiful women with obvious interest. Their eyes widen slightly. Their gaze locks on and stays too long. They project their desire outward like a spotlight, and women feel this immediately. It creates pressure. It makes them the prey. And being made to feel like prey by a man she has not chosen triggers resistance. The predator gaze does something different. It assesses without revealing. It rests without grasping. It creates the feeling that you are being evaluated rather than worshipped. And this reversal changes everything. Machiavelli wrote that a prince must have the eyes of a hawk and the patience of a spider. He must see everything while appearing to notice nothing. This is the gaze of power. Watch any man who holds real authority. His eyes move slowly. They rest on what interests them for exactly as long as they choose. They do not dart. They do not seek. They select. Now watch a man with no authority. His eyes are always moving, scanning, checking, looking for threat, looking for approval, looking for something outside himself to validate his existence. Women read this difference in microseconds. The fast-moving eyes signal anxiety. The slow-moving eyes signal security. The eyes that seek approval signal low value. The eyes that grant attention signal high value. The eyes that avoid contact signal fear. The eyes that hold contact signal power. You cannot fake this with technique alone, but you can develop it through practice. Here is an exercise the philosophers would have approved. For the next week, practice holding eye contact 1 second longer than feels comfortable. Not staring, not glaring, simply not breaking first. When a woman looks at you, hold her gaze calmly until she looks away. When a man looks at you, do the same. You will feel the discomfort Schopenhauer described. Your body will want to look away. Your nervous system will interpret the extended contact as threat. Override it. Each time you hold contact 1 second longer, you weaken the submission reflex. You reclaim control over your own nervous system. You teach your body that you decide when to look away. Not her, not him, not your unconscious programming. You. Jung wrote about the power of the unbroken gaze in creating what he called numinous presence, a quality of being that feels almost supernatural to those who experience it. He observed this quality in shamans, in priests, in leaders who commanded absolute devotion. They all shared the same trait: eyes that did not waver. This unwavering gaze communicates something beyond confidence. It communicates that you are operating from a place most men never reach, a place of complete internal stability. When you can look at a beautiful woman without your eyes betraying want or need or nervousness, you become something rare. You become something she cannot easily categorize. And what cannot be categorized creates fascination. Freud understood that the human mind is uncomfortable with ambiguity. We compulsively try to sort every person we meet into familiar categories: safe, dangerous, interested, uninterested, higher status, lower status. The man whose gaze reveals nothing refuses categorization. He forces her to keep watching, keep assessing, keep wondering. And that wondering is the beginning of attraction. In the next segment, I will reveal how to weaponize space itself, how proximity and distance operate as invisible forces that create tension, desire, and obsession. The philosophers called this the geometry of power, and almost no one teaches it. Every animal understands territory. A wolf knows exactly where his ground ends and another's begins. A lion will die defending space that exists only as invisible lines. Birds sing not for joy, but to mark boundaries that trespassers cross at their peril. Humans are no different. We simply forgot that we are animals. Robert Greene wrote that space is the silent language of power. How much you occupy, how freely you move through it, how you respond when others enter yours. Most men have surrendered their territory without realizing they ever owned it. And women notice this surrender the moment it happens. Schopenhauer observed that weak men compress themselves. They pull their arms close. They cross their legs tightly. They minimize the space they occupy as though apologizing for their existence. Strong men do the opposite. They expand. They rest their arms wide. They plant their feet apart. They claim space as though it belongs to them by natural right. This is not learned behavior. Watch any child before society breaks him. He sprawls. He reaches. He treats every room as his kingdom. Then he is told to sit still, to take less space, to make room for others, to be polite. And slowly, inch by inch, he surrenders the territory that was his birthright. By adulthood, most men occupy the minimum space required to exist. They stand with their weight on one foot, ready to move if someone more important needs their spot. They sit with their limbs tucked in, unconsciously signaling that they deserve no more than this small portion. Women read this compression as weakness, not consciously. They could not tell you why the man in the corner seems less attractive than the man taking up half the couch, but their ancient programming registers the difference and files it away. Small space, small man. Machiavelli wrote about what he called the strategic use of distance. He observed that princes who allowed others too close lost their mystique. Their humanity became visible. Their flaws became obvious. But princes who maintained too much distance lost connection. They became abstractions rather than leaders. The master prince understood how to modulate distance, close enough to create loyalty, far enough to maintain authority. This principle applies directly to attraction. Most men make one of two mistakes. They crowd too close, violating her space before earning access, or they stay too far, never creating the physical tension that sparks desire. The first mistake triggers her defense systems. The second mistake puts you in the category of men who do not matter. The dark psychology solution is dynamic distance, moving closer when she earns it, moving away when she expects you to stay, never letting her predict exactly where you will be. This unpredictability creates tension, and tension creates attraction. Freud wrote extensively about the relationship between physical proximity and psychological arousal. He observed that humans cannot be physically close to another person without experiencing some form of emotional activation. The body does not distinguish between types of arousal: anxiety, excitement, fear, desire. The physical sensations are nearly identical: racing heart, quickened breath, heightened awareness. This is why proximity is so powerful. When you stand slightly closer than social norms permit, you create arousal in her body. Her conscious mind may not register attraction, but her nervous system is now activated. And here is the secret Freud uncovered. The mind will create a story to explain what the body feels. If she is aroused and you are present, her mind will search for an explanation. And often, the explanation it settles on is attraction. This is not manipulation. This is how human psychology actually operates. The philosophers simply understood it before the scientists proved it. Green described what he called the approach-withdraw pattern. He found this pattern in every successful seduction throughout history. Move closer, then pull away. Create warmth, then create cold. Give attention, then remove it. This pattern creates psychological addiction. The uncertainty activates the same brain regions as gambling. Each approach creates hope. Each withdrawal creates longing. The combination produces obsession. Most men approach and stay. They get close to a woman and then hover there, constant and predictable like furniture. And like furniture, they are eventually ignored. The man who approaches and withdraws becomes a source of emotional fluctuation. He creates peaks and valleys, pleasure and pain. The contrast between these states is what produces deep attraction. Schopenhauer wrote that we only value what we fear losing. The man who is always present cannot be feared lost. The man who appears and disappears becomes valuable precisely because his presence is not guaranteed. Here is how to apply this immediately. When you speak to a woman, do not stand facing her directly. This is confrontational, aggressive. It pins her in place. Instead, stand at an angle. This communicates that you could leave at any moment, that your attention is a gift being given, not a demand being made. Occasionally, lean slightly closer when she says something interesting, not toward her face, toward her words, as though what she said deserves more attention. Then lean back. Return to neutral. Let the closeness be temporary. This rhythm creates the approach-withdraw pattern at a micro level. It keeps her nervous system activated. It prevents her from settling into comfort. And comfort is where attraction goes to die. In the next segment, I will reveal the dark psychology of timing, how silence operates as a weapon, how the pause between moments creates more attraction than the moments themselves. The philosophers called this the mastery of negative space, and it may be the most powerful principle I teach you today. Music is not made of notes. Music is made of the silence between notes. Any composer understands this. The pause before the crescendo creates the crescendo. The rest between phrases gives meaning to the phrases. Without silence, there is only noise. The philosophers understood that human interaction operates the same way. What you do not do matters more than what you do. What you do not say lands harder than what you say. The space you leave empty is where attraction grows. Robert Greene called this the art of absence. He found that throughout history, the figures who created the deepest obsession were those who mastered disappearance. They were not always present. They did not always respond. They left gaps that others could not help but fill with longing. Schopenhauer wrote that desire only exists in the space between wanting and having. The moment you possess something completely, desire dies. This is why availability kills attraction. The man who is always there, always responsive, always eager to engage, removes the gap entirely. He leaves no space for her desire to grow. He smothers attraction with presence before it ever has the chance to breathe. The man who understands negative space does the opposite. He creates gaps deliberately. He leaves silences that make her wonder. He builds pauses that make her lean forward. He understands that what he withholds creates more value than what he gives. Machiavelli wrote about a principle he called strategic absence. He observed that princes who were constantly visible became common. Their presence lost meaning. Their appearance generated no excitement. But princes who disappeared at the height of their power returned to find their legend had grown in their absence. This is not logic. This is human psychology. When you are present, she processes you as reality. Ordinary, known, categorized. When you are absent, she processes you as imagination. And imagination is always more powerful than reality. In your absence, she does not remember you as you are. She remembers you as she felt. The emotions become separated from the facts. And emotions, unanchored from reality, tend to grow. This is why the pause after attraction is more important than the attraction itself. Freud wrote about the compulsion to complete. The human mind cannot tolerate incompleteness. An unfinished sentence demands finishing. An unresolved tension demands resolution. A gap demands filling. When you leave gaps in your communication, her mind will fill them. When you pause before responding, she will wonder what you are thinking. When you end an interaction before it reaches its natural conclusion, she will complete it in her imagination. And whatever she creates in her imagination will be more powerful than anything you could have provided. This is the principle the dark psychologists understood. You do not create attraction by giving. You create attraction by creating spaces that demand to be filled. Here is how this operates in practice. Most men respond to messages immediately. They answer every question fully. They keep conversations going past their natural endpoint. This removes all negative space. There is nothing to wonder about, nothing to anticipate, nothing to miss. The man who understands timing responds when he chooses, not when expected. He answers with enough to satisfy, but not enough to complete. He ends conversations at the peak of interest, not at the point of exhaustion. Each pause he creates becomes a space where her thoughts return to him. Each gap becomes an opportunity for her imagination to work in his favor. Each silence becomes louder than words. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the power of restraint. He believed that the measure of a man was not what he could do, but what he could refrain from doing. Any fool can speak. Any fool can act. Any fool can fill silence with noise. But only a man of genuine power can hold back when everything in him wants to move forward. This restraint is what women sense beneath the surface. It is not passivity. Passivity is the absence of desire. Restraint is the presence of desire combined with the discipline not to act on it. When a woman senses that you want to move closer but choose not to, she registers something unusual. A man in control of himself. A man whose actions are chosen, not compelled. This is deeply attractive at an evolutionary level. It signals that you will not be controlled by impulse, that you can be trusted with power, that you possess yourself completely. Jung wrote about the shadow and how the unexpressed parts of the self create fascination in others. What you reveal loses power. What you conceal gains it. The man who shows everything has no shadow. He is fully illuminated. There is nothing left to discover, nothing left to wonder about, nothing left to chase. The man who reveals only portions of himself remains permanently interesting. Each interaction uncovers something new. Each conversation suggests depths still unexplored. This is why silence is more attractive than speech. Every word you speak illuminates you. Every silence preserves your shadow. The philosophers understood that mystery is not created by being mysterious. Mystery is created by simply not explaining yourself, not filling every gap, not answering every unasked question. The negative space you leave becomes the territory where her curiosity lives. In the final segment, I will show you how to bring everything together. How stillness, gaze, space, and silence combine into something the philosophers called sovereign presence. This is the final transformation, the moment where technique dissolves into identity. And once you reach it, you will never need to say anything again. Everything I have taught you so far is technique. Stillness, gaze, space, silence. These are methods, tools, external adjustments that create internal impressions. But the philosophers knew something deeper. Technique eventually fails. It cracks under pressure. It forgets itself in moments of genuine stress. It reveals the gap between who you are pretending to be and who you actually are. And women sense this gap instantly. Robert Greene wrote that the greatest seducers in history did not use techniques. They became something. They transformed their fundamental nature until the external signals of power flowed automatically from an internal reality. This is sovereign presence, not the performance of power, but the possession of it. And this is what separates men who attract women from men who trick them temporarily. Nietzsche wrote about what he called self-overcoming. He believed that the highest human achievement was not conquering others, but conquering the self. Most men are slaves to their own impulses. Their fear controls them. Their desire controls them. Their need for approval controls them. They react to the world rather than creating it. The sovereign man has reversed this relationship. He controls his fear. He controls his desire. He controls his need for approval. He acts upon the world rather than being acted upon. This internal revolution produces external transformation automatically. When you no longer fear rejection, your body stops signaling fear. When you no longer need approval, your eyes stop seeking it. When you no longer feel lack, your presence stops projecting it. The techniques become unnecessary because the source of the problem has been eliminated. Schopenhauer wrote that most men live entirely in the external world. They define themselves by what others think of them. They measure their worth by external validation. They exist only as reflections in the eyes of others. This externally referenced existence creates the neediness that women find repulsive. The sovereign man lives from the inside out. His sense of worth is generated internally. His identity is self-defined. He does not need her approval because he has already approved of himself. This is not arrogance. Arrogance is a mask worn by insecurity. This is completion, the simple state of not needing anything from her that you do not already possess. And this completion communicates itself through every channel we have discussed. Your stillness becomes natural because there is nothing you need to chase. Your gaze becomes steady because there is nothing you fear. Your use of space becomes commanding because you are not apologizing for existing. Your silence becomes powerful because you are not desperate to fill it with proof of your value. Epictetus taught that there are things within our control and things outside our control. He believed that peace came only from focusing entirely on what we can control and releasing attachment to what we cannot. Her attraction to you is outside your control. This statement may seem to contradict everything I have taught you, but it is the foundation beneath all of it. You can control your stillness, your gaze, your use of space, your mastery of silence. But you cannot control how she responds to these signals. That choice belongs to her alone. The sovereign man understands this completely. He does not perform for a specific outcome. He simply presents the best version of himself and allows her to choose. If she chooses interest, he receives it without grasping. If she chooses indifference, he accepts it without collapse. This non-attachment is the final piece, because neediness is not caused by what you do. Neediness is caused by your attachment to the outcome of what you do. And women can smell attachment from across the room. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a man should be like a rocky promontory, against which the waves crash endlessly. The waves come, the waves go, the rock remains. This is the image of sovereign presence. She tests you. You remain. She withdraws. You remain. She challenges. You remain. She praises. You remain. Not because you are performing stability, but because you have become stable. Not because you are hiding your reactions, but because your reactions have fundamentally changed. The man who has done the internal work no longer needs to monitor his body language. His body language flows from his internal state. He no longer needs to control his eyes. His eyes reflect his genuine lack of desperation. He no longer needs to calculate distance. His comfort with himself creates natural command of space. Jung wrote about the process of individuation, the journey toward becoming a complete self. He believed this was the great work of every human life. The sovereign presence I am describing is the product of this journey. It cannot be faked for long. It cannot be performed indefinitely. It can only be grown through the slow process of confronting your shadows, reclaiming your power, and building genuine internal worth. This is not a weekend project. This is the work of years. But here is what the philosophers want you to understand. Every step on this path produces results. You do not need to complete the journey to benefit from it. Each small increase in internal stability produces a corresponding increase in external presence. Start with the techniques. Practice the stillness. Develop the gaze. Command the space. Master the silence. But know that these are training wheels. The destination is not perfect technique. The destination is a self so complete that technique becomes unnecessary. In the final segment, I will give you the path forward. The daily practices that build sovereign presence over time. The philosophers left instructions. Most men never find them. You are about to. Knowledge without practice is entertainment. You can watch this video 10 times. You can memorize every principle. You can quote Machiavelli and Schopenhauer and Green in conversations, and nothing will change. The philosophers were not theorists. They were practitioners. They developed systems for transforming knowledge into embodiment, for turning insight into identity. What I am about to give you is not more information. It is a path, a daily practice that will rebuild you from the inside out. Follow it, and within months, you will not recognize the man you used to be. The first practice is solitary stillness. Every morning, before you speak to anyone, before you check your phone, before you engage with the external world, Sit in complete stillness for 10 minutes. Not meditation, not breathing exercises, not visualization, just stillness. Your body will fight this. Your mind will generate thoughts designed to make you move. Itches will appear. Anxieties will surface. Every part of you will resist the simple act of remaining motionless. This resistance is exactly what you need to overcome. Schopenhauer wrote that the will expresses itself as constant motion. The undisciplined will cannot rest. It is always reaching, always grasping, always moving toward the next thing. Solitary stillness trains your will to obey you rather than command you. Each morning you hold stillness, you strengthen your capacity to hold it in public. Your body learns that it does not control you, that you can override its impulses, that you are sovereign over your own nervous system. This practice alone will transform your presence within 30 days. The second practice is gaze holding. Once daily, find a mirror and meet your own eyes. Do not look away. Do not adjust. Do not break contact to check the time or scratch your face or attend to any other impulse. Hold your own gaze for 5 minutes. This is uncomfortable. Most men cannot do it for 30 seconds. They feel the strange pressure of meeting themselves. They want to escape into distraction. The man who cannot hold his own gaze cannot hold anyone else's. This practice builds what the philosophers called self-confrontation. It forces you to exist with yourself without escape. It eliminates the internal flinch that causes your eyes to break contact in social situations. When you can look at yourself without wavering, you can look at her without wavering. And that unwavering gaze, as we have discussed, communicates more than any words ever could. The third practice is deliberate silence. Choose 1 hour each day where you speak to no one. Not because no one is present, but because you choose not to speak, even when speaking is possible. During this hour, if someone addresses you, respond with the minimum necessary. Nod, gesture. Use 1 word where 10 would be normal. This practice breaks the compulsive need to fill silence. Freud observed that most speech is driven by anxiety. We talk to discharge tension. We fill quiet spaces because their emptiness makes us uncomfortable. Deliberate silence teaches you that empty space is not your enemy, that you do not need to perform constantly, that your presence alone is sufficient. Carry this practice into your interactions with women. Speak less than feels natural. Let pauses extend beyond comfort. Discover that the silence you feared is actually where your power lives. The fourth practice is territorial expansion. Once daily, consciously expand the space you occupy. If you normally sit with your legs together, plant your feet wide. If you normally keep your arms close, rest them across the back of the chair. If you normally stand against the wall, stand in the center of the room. This will feel arrogant at first. You have been trained since childhood to minimize yourself, to be polite, to make room for others. Override this training. You are reclaiming territory that was always yours. You are undoing the conditioning that taught you to apologize for existing. Green wrote that space is power made visible. Each inch you reclaim externally represents ground recovered internally. Within weeks, expansive posture will become your default. You will no longer compress yourself unconsciously. You will occupy space as though you have the right to occupy it, because you do. The fifth practice is outcome release. Each night, before sleep, review the day's interactions. Identify any moment where you attached to an outcome, where you needed her to respond a certain way, where you felt the grip of wanting something you could not control. Then consciously release it, not by suppressing the desire, by acknowledging it, accepting it, and choosing to hold it loosely rather than tightly. Marcus Aurelius did this practice nightly. He reviewed his attachments. He noted where he had given his peace to external circumstances. He reclaimed his sovereignty through conscious release. This practice is slow. Attachment does not dissolve in days or weeks. But each night you practice, you loosen its grip slightly. And loose attachment is the secret foundation beneath all sovereign presence. The philosophers did not write for entertainment. They wrote for transformation. What I have given you in this video is not theory. It is the distilled wisdom of men who spent their lives studying power, presence, and the dark mechanics of human attraction. Stillness, gaze, space, silence, sovereignty. These 5 principles will change how every woman experiences you. Not through tricks, not through performance, but through fundamental transformation of who you are. The path is now visible. The only question is whether you will walk it. I will see you in the next video.